Despite being blessed with sons named Joshua and Ethan, they became overly attached to Susan, who had filled their heads with falsehoods, leading them to neglect their parents. Some time after Susan, Joshua, and Ethan were kicked out of the house, George passed away suddenly. When I informed Joshua over the phone, his response was unbelievable. "Your dad passed away. Leave the funeral stuff to you, Mom. I don't want to see the face of someone who kicked us out. Yeah, and we're having a great time here, so don't bother us. Just tell the relatives we can't make it because of work or something." I was dumbfounded. A week after the funeral, I received a letter from George addressed to me. When I opened it, it read, "Please read this without our sons finding out." As I read on, I was overwhelmed with emotion. Susan, who had trampled over our family life with dirty shoes. And Joshua and Ethan, who refused to attend their father's funeral. I won't let it end like this. My name is Alice, a 54-year-old housewife and full-time employee. I met George at a welcoming party for new employees at our associated companies. Despite being a light drinker, I couldn't refuse the alcohol offered to me and ended up feeling sick from drinking too much. As I shrank into a corner seat, looking for a chance to leave, George noticed me, struck up a conversation, and arranged a taxi for me. Later, I took a day off to thank him at his office. He was surprised to see me during his break. "Coming all this way just to say thanks? You're really conscientious." We became friends, started dating, and eventually got married. Both of us, George who grew up in a complex environment and I who lost my parents as a child, longed for a warm family. We were sure that we could be happy together. But, living together brought unexpected turmoil due to George's sister, Susan. Before the wedding, I tried to greet Susan, but she was too busy to meet, so our first encounter was at the wedding. Since George's parents had passed away, it was a simple ceremony with friends and relatives. Susan stood out in various ways. Wearing a pure white dress that emphasized her cleavage at a wedding. And sporting a heavy makeup like a stage actress, she reeked of perfume. I tried not to show my disgust, but Susan either noticed or didn't like me from the start. She didn't greet me and mocked me. "George, couldn't you find someone better at your workplace? Such a plain Jane as a sister-in-law is embarrassing." "Come on, sis." "Well, maybe she suits you, Mr. Super Serious." George looked ready to confront Susan, but a sibling fight on the wedding day seemed like a bad omen. "I'm fine. Let's go and prepare." I forced a smile and led George to the staff. That was our terrible first impression, but I didn't think much of it, expecting to meet only at occasional family events. However, the situation soon took a drastic turn. After a short marriage due to her husband's infidelity, Susan unexpectedly moved in with us. "My ex left, and I want to move out too. Our parents sold their place when I got married, so I can't go back to my parents. Can I stay at George's place for a while?" George was visibly frustrated with Susan's call. "Seriously? Why don't you rent an apartment? You got a lot of alimony, right? Just let me stay until I find a nice place. I want to take my time choosing, not settle for some rundown house like you guys. But 20 years old, really? Even if it's got a yard and a garage, I wouldn't want it." "Enough, it's earthquake reinforced and remodeled. Just rent a weekly apartment." "Kidding, you're so serious. I'll be there this weekend, my lease is up." In the end, Susan showed up with her stuff and settled in without asking. The main problem was her lack of awareness that she was being taken care of by us. Susan acted like it was her own house, causing George and me considerable distress. Susan would go out every night, sleep in until the afternoon, and then spend the rest of the day lounging on the living room sofa, playing with her phone or mindlessly watching TV. This routine would continue until she went out again after dinner. I sometimes took a day off and stayed home, so I know this was her daily routine. When I would come home tired in the evening after a full day's work, Susan would ask me in a dissatisfied tone, "Hey, is dinner ready yet? How long till it's done?" "In about 30 minutes. "That long? Hurry up, will you?" She would also make snide remarks about my cleaning, saying things like, "You're not very good at this," or you're cutting corners. I share the cleaning duties with George, you know. He's tired too. As a wife, you should be doing all the household chores. I didn't want to complain to George about Susan and worsen their sibling relationship, but he eventually noticed my growing unhappiness. When George asked and I told him about Susan's behavior, he became furious. Listen, Susan. Don't you dare overstep your boundaries, you're just a guest here. Oh, I'm just stating the obvious. Susan replied nonchalantly. And start contributing to the household expenses. I'm still in shock from my husband's cheating. How can I work in this state? And you want to charge me? You can afford it with the $100,000 alimony you got. You have enough money to buy clothes and go out drinking. I don't need my brother telling me how to spend my money. With Susan acting like this, both George and I were exasperated. My dream of a happy married life had turned into a nightmare because of Susan. George and I had wanted kids soon, but perhaps due to the stress over Susan, it just wasn't happening. We were discussing getting checked when I discovered I was pregnant in our 4th year of marriage. Tears of joy streamed down our faces. George took this opportunity to suggest Susan move out. Susan, we're going to need more space when the baby comes. Maybe it's time you moved to your own place? Then Susan turned to me and asked, Alice, what are you going to do about work? I plan to return to work after a year of parental leave. Well, I can look after the baby. What? No, we're planning to use daycare. Don't you know? Everywhere around here is full. After inquiring at the city office and asking other moms at work, I found out that even the non-licensed daycares had over a year's wait list. See, I told you so. A few months later, as my belly began to show, Susan smugly said, I'll take care of the baby until you get a daycare spot. I owe you, and I'll do it for free. It'll be tough on your finances if you quit your job, right? After discussing it, George and I reluctantly agreed to let Susan help. Honestly, I was extremely anxious. But surprisingly, Susan took great care of our newborn Joshua. She prepared well by looking up childcare information online, took care of his meals and daily needs, and even took him to parks and community centers. She devoted herself to Joshua. It was evident from how much Joshua adored Susan. Even after our second son Ethan was born 2 years later, Susan's dedication didn't change. With George and me busy with work, we were grateful for how much she helped with the kids. But as the boys grew, they started to avoid us more and more openly. Joshua, Ethan, wanna go to the amusement park at the end of the month? Nah, we're going with Susan. How about we go out for a barbecue for Ethan's birthday? You mentioned wanting to go before, right? Susan already took us to a fancy barbecue place. For my birthday, we're going to a high-end sushi restaurant. Can't wait. George and I felt torn seeing our sons so excited about spending time with Susan. Even after Joshua and Ethan started elementary school, we were grateful to Susan for spending time with them on our workdays. Even on weekends when George and I are home, Joshua and Ethan stick close to Susan. They don't try to talk to us and act like it doesn't matter whether we're there or not, playing games and going out with her. Things got worse as Joshua got older. He would blatantly show his displeasure, ignore us, or even click his tongue when we tried to talk to him. Once, Joshua started eating while playing on his phone, and when I reprimanded him, he glared and snapped at me. Shut up, old lady. For a moment, I couldn't believe my ears. Man, it would have been great if Susan was our mom. She always gives us money and takes us places. Yeah, totally. Being born to parents like ours was a total bust. I was shocked by their words, but tried to stay calm as I responded. Susan doesn't work despite being healthy, doesn't contribute financially, and just spends her ex-husband's alimony. So what? That's a lifestyle to aspire to. Joshua said, looking dreamy. But, like, Susan raised us, right? Complaining about her seems weird. Yeah. You guys didn't really want kids, did you? What? I know. Susan told us. You had us just because you had to. That's not true. George and I always wanted kids. Susan offered to help until we found childcare. I was desperate in my denial. I can't believe you'd say that to me. Joshua smirked at my choked voice. You guys are always so annoying. Telling us to do homework, saying we play too many games. Yeah, Susan gets it. She says it's fine not to do homework, and even stays up with us playing games till dawn. I snapped back, annoyed. Susan has no responsibility for your futures. Your dad and I say these things because we're worried about you, even if it means you'll hate us. Yeah, right. You're just jealous because we're close to Susan. How stupid. Maybe you shouldn't have let her take care of us. I felt like crying. Looking up, I saw George standing at the doorway, his fists trembling. Who do you think you're talking to? Oh, hey Dad. Working late again today? Must be tough. Yeah, for such a measly salary. That's so true. The boys laughed mockingly, leaving George speechless. Finally, you talk to us, and it's to mock your parents. George, stop being so loud. Susan called out as she came down from her room and appeared in the kitchen, shrugging her shoulders in annoyance. Getting worked up over what kids say is so immature. It's because you spoil them that they're like this. George exploded. I've had enough. Get out, now. What? I've been nice to my nephews, and this is the thanks I get? If you're going to stay, then pay your way. Susan puffed up her cheeks. Fine, I'll leave. Happy now? What? Susan, you're really leaving? No way. Susan quickly agreed, went to her room to pack her things in a suitcase, and came down to the entrance. I put my clothes in boxes. I've arranged for movers this weekend. Leave it till then. Okay. Susan, are you really going? Yes. Take care. She smiled at Joshua and Ethan as they saw her off to the gate, then left. But it was too late to bridge the gap between us and our sons. As teenagers, Joshua and Ethan became more rebellious. Joshua quit his job within a month of starting after high school. And 2 years later, Ethan followed suit, quitting his job after just a few days. They bragged about starting a business together and engaged in dubious deals, spending money from odd jobs in a single night. After a huge fight, George kicked them out of the house. When you get a job, come back. No way we'll ever come back to this place. And so, Susan, who had stirred up our family, and the sons she influenced, Joshua and Ethan, left, and it was back to just my husband and me. I worried about how Joshua and Ethan were doing, but without the three of them causing chaos, I breathed a sigh of relief. At the end of that year, as I was about to leave work and head home, I received a call from George's colleague. Are you Alice? George collapsed at work. What? He's currently receiving treatment in the ICU at the city hospital. I understand. I'll go there right away. I felt like I was about to panic, but I ordered myself to calm down and drove to the hospital. I identified myself at the ICU reception, waited in the hallway for a while, and then the automatic doors opened. A man in a white coat, presumably a doctor, appeared. As soon as he saw me, he lowered his gaze to the floor. We did our best, but I'm sorry. I was speechless. Overwhelmed by shock, I stood there in place. This morning, I had seen off George as he left for work, just as always. Keep your schedule open for our anniversary next month. Sure. The usual restaurant? I have a surprise planned for this year. It's the same restaurant, though. I never imagined that such a mundane conversation would be our last. It felt like my field of vision suddenly turned completely gray. Am I the only one left living, wondering if there's any meaning to it? As I pondered ominous thoughts in the back of my mind, I decided to contact everyone anyway, Joshua, Ethan, and Susan, and inform them. George has passed away. I left a voicemail, and I also sent a message. That night, I received a return call from Joshua. Amidst cheerful music and chatter in the background, it seemed like he was having dinner at a restaurant. Joshua? Your father has. My voice trembled as I spoke, and Joshua replied with a half laugh. The funeral and stuff, I'll leave it to you, Mom. Someone who kicked us out like that, I don't even want to see his face. Yeah. We're having fun here, so don't bother us. Oh dear, George really made himself unpopular, didn't he? I could hear Susan chuckling in the background. Just tell the relatives we're absent because of work. Say hi to them for us. Wait, just a minute. I stood in shock for a while, holding the phone. Are these people really George's sister and sons? Filled with emptiness, I knew I had to proceed with the funeral arrangements. I contacted George's relatives and the funeral home we always use, and arranged a family funeral. The sudden farewell felt unreal, and I couldn't shed a tear during the funeral. However, as normal life resumed, the reality of losing George hit me repeatedly. While preparing dinner, setting up to record a TV drama we used to watch together, making coffee, I'd inadvertently prepare for two, or start talking to him, and then realize George was no longer there, and I couldn't stop the tears. A week after George's passing, I was watering the flowers in the garden when the mailman's car arrived. I took the mail and went inside. Among the direct mail, I found an envelope addressed to me and was instantly taken aback. The distinctive handwriting was unmistakably George's. With a rush of emotion, I opened the envelope, and first, it explained why I was receiving this letter. I entrusted an old friend to post this in case I passed away. Then, after a heartfelt message of gratitude for the years we spent together, there was a line that caught my eye. Please read this without our sons finding out. My heart swelled as I continued reading the letter. I felt a warmth in my eyes, realizing George had seen how much I worried about the kids. I wiped my tears and made a decision. I had to respond to George's feelings. Susan, who had trampled on our family without care. And Joshua and Ethan, who refused to attend their father's funeral. Just you wait. I won't let it end like this. I immediately took action. George's letter said, "There's a package for you in a safety deposit box at the bank near the station. Use the enclosed key to retrieve it. I leave the rest to you, Alice." Using the address in the letter, I went to the bank and entered the safety deposit box room beside the ATMs. Following the instructions nervously, I inserted the card into the slot. After entering the PIN, a square part of the table opened, revealing the safety deposit box George had rented. I used the key to open the box and check its contents. Sure enough, everything George mentioned in his letter was there. I put them in my bag and left the bank. Later, I invited Susan, Joshua, and Ethan to my house. I want to share George's inheritance with everyone who was important to him. With that excuse, all three of them came eagerly, without a doubt. The word shameless fitted them perfectly. Skipping the funeral but wanting the inheritance, how audacious could they be? Susan, who couldn't wait while I was making tea, blushed and started talking. That stingy, low-earning George had an inheritance, huh? Susan, maybe he had hidden assets because he was stingy. Thinking about it, being stingy might not be so bad. I wonder if he transferred his inheritance to some account. Anyway, I'm excited. Then Susan smiled at me. You did the right thing letting your sister-in-law know. Well, I suppose. Mom, stop beating around the bush. Is Dad's inheritance jewels? Maybe gold bars? As the three of them fidgeted, I smiled. Before that, please listen to this. I placed an IC recorder and George's cell phone on the dining table, which made Joshua, Ethan, and Susan look puzzled. Dad's cell phone, and what's this? An IC recorder, right? The kind used for investigating affairs. I've seen it on TV. Wait, did Dad, with that face, have an affair? Joshua started laughing crudely, but his face stiffened as soon as I pressed the play button on the phone. Joshua's voice came through, talking to a friend on the phone. Yeah. Remember that old lady you met at our house? Susan, her name is. Joshua was speaking in an obviously cheerful tone. She wears so much makeup and clings to me, calling me Joshua, dear. It's gross, but she'll hand over money if you flatter her. You know, there's a use for fools and old ladies. In front of a frozen Joshua, Susan's face turned into a picture of fury. When I stopped the playback, Susan asked in an angry voice, "What was that, Joshua?" "I don't know. A stranger, maybe? Or Dad recorded that voiceover." Joshua tried to play dumb, and Susan yelled at him. "George was too tech illiterate to do something like that." "Oh, I just remembered something I gotta do. I'm leaving." While Susan and Joshua were arguing, Ethan tried to sneak out, so I promptly presented the second recording. "How much money did you get from Susan?" $2,000. "Damn, I only got 1,000. What did you do?" "Gave her a bouquet of roses and a high-brand bag for her birthday. Maybe I'll give her a fake brand. She can't tell the difference." "Yeah, you're right." Joshua and Ethan laughed uproariously. "She lives for being showered with gifts by men, even at her age. Almost hitting 60, yet she still thinks she's young. Believing every flattery from men she meets at the bar and splurging a fortune on them. She's an easy target." "Stupid, really." The two slander knew no bounds. The blonde hair is laughable, too. She dreams of marrying a young Korean pop star, despite the age difference. Huh? Even as a joke, that's just creepy. In the midst of Joshua and Ethan's laughter, the recording abruptly stopped. Ethan, with a forced smile, muttered defensively, "Man, when did Dad record this? And to expose it to Mom after he's gone? That's just mean." "Yeah. Pretending to be a good guy, but those are the ones you can't trust." Even now, they were spouting insults about George, which made me furious. As I was about to speak, Susan shouted at them, "You dare mock people? Who do you think raised you since you were kids? Don't mess with me." "See, that's what's so annoying about you. Always acting like we owe you." "Exactly. Doesn't it feel empty, saying that?" Laughed at by Joshua and Ethan, Susan's ears turned red with anger. "Now it's your turn, Susan. Having a favorite bar to go to, that's quite nice, isn't it?" As I reached for the IC recorder, Susan's face tensed up. Without hesitation, I pressed play. First, lively music, clinking glasses, and a man and woman talking. Then Susan's high-pitched voice overlapped. "That's right. I've had my nephews wrapped around my finger since they were little. Filled their heads with all sorts of nonsense about their parents. Kids are easy to manipulate." "Oh, Susan, you're so clever." Praised by the man, Susan spoke proudly. "I'm single. I need them to take care of me in my old age. Look at my nephews, handsome, right?" "True. They look like models or pop stars." Impressed, the host grew more talkative. "I dream of my nephews feeding me, taking me on amusement park dates, even changing my diapers in the future." Wow. Going into a facility? No way. If I'm going to be looked after, it's by handsome men only. Can't wait." I stopped the playback and looked at Susan. With Joshua and Ethan's piercing gaze upon her, Susan turned away. "So both my brother and his wife had nasty hobbies. Recording such things secretly. You were gallivanting around so much, I heard from relatives and got curious. After all, alimony from your ex-husband should have run out after 20 years, yet you remained unemployed. So, I hired a private investigator to look into your background." I explained. "And this is what was recorded." "Susan, you really are quite a character." "No, not funny at all. Creepy old lady." "What do you think of us?" As the sons cringed and hugged themselves, Susan's eyes narrowed in anger. "Shut up. I did indeed dote on you. Spent my precious time and money. What's wrong with expecting something in return?" "Spent money? Oh, you mean this?" I spread a bank book on the table, making Joshua and Ethan's eyes sparkle. "Oh, is this finally the inheritance?" "Well, sort of." I made a suggestive remark and looked at Susan, who was sweating coldly this time. Her face betrayed a desire to flee at the first opportunity, her eyes darting around as if seeking an escape. I addressed Joshua and Ethan. "Remember what I told you before? George had cut ties with his father before we got married." "Yeah, I remember. Joshua nodded. Our grandfather, Dad's father, didn't work seriously despite being wealthy. Relied on the family fortune and racked up a huge debt. Yes, that's right. George's mother worked herself to death paying off those debts. Right, Susan? Yes. I cut ties with him too after becoming an adult. Though I did attend his funeral. Susan nodded. So afterwards, the inheritance George received from wealthy relatives, he kept it a secret and deposited it in an account for you three. Huh? We never heard about this. If there was money, why didn't he tell us? He planned to proceed with the inheritance once you started working seriously. But before that, someone used it without permission. Joshua and Ethan simultaneously turned to look at Susan. No way! Yes. Susan had been taking George's bank book and seal without permission during his lifetime and withdrawing money. The two, apprehensive, looked at the bank book and recoiled. $200,000 down to $10 in 1 year? Hey, what did you spend it on? Well, this guy convinced me there was a great investment opportunity. I thought I could double it and pay it back. I just borrowed it, that's all. Susan wriggled as Joshua and Ethan exploded in anger. Don't joke. That was supposed to be our money. Just $200,000 and you're making a fuss. Considering the effort I put into raising you, you should be giving it to me for free. Susan retorted defiantly, causing Joshua and Ethan to bristle with anger, veins popping on their foreheads, ready to pounce. But that's not all, Susan. I sighed, spreading Joshua and Ethan's bank books on the table. You both started working right after high school, so the college funds were left untouched. I was going to give it to you once you started working seriously. But this too was meddled with. Seeing only pennies left in their accounts, Joshua tore at his hair in frustration, and Ethan almost cried. Damn it, woman! What you're doing is criminal. Yeah, we'll sue you. Don't be silly. It's called family theft and doesn't count as a crime when done by a relative. Susan crossed her arms and legs, laughing irritatingly. I'll pay it back someday, maybe in the next life. Oh, you can be charged for it. That's why I called the police earlier. At my words, Susan's eyes widened in shock. Huh? Indeed, relatives living together can't be charged for crimes, which is why George kicked you out, planning to report you. Dumbfounded, Susan asked me in disbelief. You betrayed your husband's sister? Well, yes, that's what happened. Huh? Really? Unbelievable! After all I've done for you, how ungrateful! Who's ungrateful here? I yelled back, silencing the room. I glared straight at Susan, unleashing my fury. Because of you, our family is a mess. It's beyond repair. What are you going to do about it? Overreacting much. Susan shrugged. I should have never trusted you and kicked you out sooner. Then Susan turned to Joshua and Ethan, spreading a sinister smile across her face. I wanted to be a mom. Huh? Since I couldn't become one, I thought I'd take your mom away from you too, out of spite. Joshua and Ethan looked terrified. Are you okay in the head? Just stay away from me, for good. That's a problem. I came today to borrow money from you. Susan smirked. We're family, so we should help each other in times of need, right? Yeah, right, Mom. Suddenly, Joshua and Ethan, who had been furious moments ago, put on a smile. Actually, we're broke too. Got fired for talking back at work for taking a little unscheduled break. They're so arrogant. Ethan and Joshua complained bitterly. I felt a headache coming on. Getting fired is what you deserve. Huh, why? Yeah. We got kicked out of our apartment. Joshua casually revealed. Didn't pay the rent. So, we'll stay here for a while. That's okay, right? And cover our debts. Once we're debt-free, we'll start working seriously. Can't you lend us about $40,000? You're working, after all. Faced with their brazen request, I felt a rush of anger. Don't mess around. I have nothing to lend to heartless sons who skipped their father's funeral. I vehemently refused, but they persisted. "Please, Mom. If you keep this up, I'll report you to the police too. Don't ever set foot in this house again." Just then, a police car's siren stopped in front of the house. Susan, trying to escape in a panic, ran into the police officers at the front door and was quietly taken away. "Damn, are we gonna get arrested too? Let's just get out of here for now." Joshua and Ethan glanced at me, standing firm, gave up on asking for money, and left. Joshua and Ethan, realizing that the money and allowance Susan had given them came from George and their own savings, seemed to have finally lost all affection for Susan. "I don't want to end up like them," they said, seemingly deciding to work seriously. But their laziness didn't disappear overnight, and they kept calling me alternately. "Mom, I'm being pressed for payments at the bar. Can you lend me some money?" "I blew it all on horse racing. Can you lend me about $100,000? I got so annoyed that I blocked their contact information. Later, they tried to ask other relatives for money but were shunned and denounced as heartless for not attending their father's funeral, leading to estrangement. Eventually, pursued by debt collectors for borrowing from shady sources, Joshua and Ethan woke up and started working seriously. However, they had racked up so much debt that they were banned from the nightclubs and bars where they were regulars, now shunned even at their favorite drinking spots. "We've lost all the fun in their lives," they complained. Susan, being a first offender, paid a fine and was released quickly. However, the incident led to her being dumped by her boyfriend. Moreover, after repaying the embezzled money from George's, Joshua's, and Ethan's accounts, she ended up with a huge debt. Susan now works from early morning till late at night, looking exhausted. What I kept secret from Susan and my sons was that George had left another item in the safe. A large pink diamond necklace. A prestigious heirloom passed down from his mother, as mentioned in his letter. It was intended as a gift for our 30th wedding anniversary next year. Fearing it might be found and sold by Susan or my sons, George had kept it in the safe. When appraised, it was valued at $240,000, to my astonishment. Of course, I wouldn't sell it, it's a treasured gift from George. Though I longed for a warm family, things didn't work out with my sons, and I lost my husband too. But George's memory is still alive in my heart. Moving forward, I want to live strong, cherishing the memories of George. My name is Catherine. My husband, Daniel, and I got married when his child from a previous marriage was 10 years old. It was my first marriage, so I had no clue about parenting, but I was determined to raise him right. I wanted children of my own, but I feared I'd compare them to my stepchild. That's why I never had kids of my own. Instead, I devoted myself entirely to my husband and stepson, Ted. Then, out of the blue, my husband passed away suddenly. As I was engulfed in sorrow, Ted said to me with a smile, "Dad loved his mistress more than you were just the housekeeper. Also, I'm inheriting everything, so stay out of it." "What are you talking about? Dad couldn't possibly have had a mistress." "You're the one being foolish. Dad was really good at hiding his affairs. He definitely had another woman." Such nonsense can't be true. I refused to take Ted's words seriously. "Well, it's your choice not to believe it, but it's a fact that Dad had a mistress." Ted laughed with a look of triumph. His face seemed to resemble his mother more than my husband. He always had a condescending look and tone, as if he was mocking everyone. Of course, I didn't really know his mother, his father's ex-wife. I had only seen her in photographs. But since he didn't look like my husband, I guessed he must take after her. That's why I was strict in his upbringing. I taught him what was right and wrong, and didn't hesitate to scold him when he did something bad. When he neglected his studies, I made him sit at his desk, even though he didn't like it. It's true, I was quite nagging, always making sure he wouldn't embarrass himself in public. But this kid never listened to a word I said. "Now that Dad's gone, our relationship is over." "Is that so? I really hated you, you know. Thinking that we're now strangers, I feel so relieved." "Did you hate me that much?" "Yeah, I did. You always disapproved of everything I did. he said, even though he was often doing things that deserved disapproval. When I came home late, you were always nagging. Of course I was. You were only in middle school at that time. But my friends were out playing till midnight. They were a bad crowd. You shouldn't have been hanging out with people like that. Who I hang out with is my business. You might think that now as a college student, but back then you were still a child. As a parent, I couldn't just let things slide. Parent? I never thought of you as a parent. You were nothing more than a housekeeper. A housekeeper. Yes, a housekeeper. He affirmed, smiling smugly, occasionally letting out an exaggerated laugh. Then, a woman suddenly appeared in our spacious living room, agreeing with Ted's words. Exactly. Ted, you understand it well. His father always said you were just the housekeeper. And who are you? I asked, recognizing her face. This is Camila. Dad's mistress. Dad's mistress? I thought to myself, screaming internally, no way. My husband couldn't possibly have had a mistress. Yes, I was his father's mistress, Daniel's lover. I was loved by him much more than you. That's a lie! I know you don't want to believe it, but it's the truth. No matter what you say, the fact is he loved me more. Just accept it. Dead men tell no tales. What? You must be joking. He really said that. And he told me not to give you a single penny of the inheritance. Inheritance. That's right. As a housekeeper, you have no right to any inheritance. Well, Dad had a fortune, you know. I don't know if you're aware, but all that money is mine now. Being an only child comes in handy at times like this. I don't have to share the inheritance. So, all you need to do is sign this. What is this? It's a document stating that you're renouncing your claim to the inheritance. Once you sign this, you can never claim any part of it. I see. You might want to share, but a woman who wasn't loved doesn't deserve any inheritance. Too bad. Exactly. Camila is right. Come on, sign it. Then all the inheritance will be Ted's. Ted, are you sure about this? Of course. I'm going to be rich. And at the same time, it means saying goodbye to you. Ted laughed, along with Camila, who claimed to be his father's mistress. I recognized her face, but was she really the mistress? I couldn't believe my husband would have a mistress like her. She wasn't his type at all. Then who could she be? I had a vague memory of her, but couldn't place it. Hurry up and sign it. Like it or not, you have no choice but to give up the inheritance, Ted insisted. At that moment, a realization dawned on me. But I chose not to voice it. Saying it out loud wouldn't change anything. That was my thought. So, I picked up the pen and said, all right. I'll live strong, no matter what happens. And with that, I left the house. From then on, I stayed in a hotel, looking for a place to live, visiting various real estate agencies. It was around the time I finally found a new place to live. Ted, who had told me to never contact him again, called me. When I answered the phone, wondering what it could be about, Ted spoke with an excited voice and heavy breathing. The inheritance proceedings are completed. Oh, congratulations. Now, I'm a millionaire. That's great for you. You must be so upset. Not really. By the way, who said you're a millionaire? Camila, Dad's mistress. From now on, I'll live with her as my mother. Camila said that? Yeah, she says I'm her son since I'm Dad's son. Well, she was loved by Dad, so it's not wrong to call her my mother. Plus, she wants to live with me in that house. Living together will surely be fun. That's nice. You were always strict and never considered my feelings, but she always puts my feelings first. She says I should do whatever I want. You know, I was correcting your mistakes. If you don't teach what shouldn't be done, how will you know? That's why I was strict. I don't want to hear your excuses. You just didn't like me because I was a stepchild. Did you think I was too stupid to notice? Always treating me like a child. But you were a child. You have no idea how unhappy I was living with you. You're only saying that because things didn't go your way. That means I was disciplining you properly. Pampering isn't the only way to discipline, you know? Indeed, as someone who never became a mother, I was desperate to discipline Ted properly so he wouldn't struggle as an adult. There were many times when we clashed because of this. If I had always given in to Ted's wishes, I feared he would go down the wrong path. Even at meal times, I was particularly strict about manners. Because of that, when Ted dined out, he was often complimented rather than criticized. But this led to him often calling me a tyrant and locking himself in his room. Still, I hardened my heart for the sake of my child. Now that he's in college, unless it's something serious, I don't interfere as a parent. So, since he started college, I haven't really said much. Yet, in Ted's mind, I remained the same tyrannical figure. And the person Ted chose was Camila, the woman claiming to be his father's mistress. Why does Camila say Dad was a millionaire? Dad apparently said before he died that his estate was worth over $1 million. I guess only Camila, his mistress, would know something like that. Is that so? And he wanted me to inherit everything after he passed away, and said it would be nice if Camila lived in the house too. He wanted us to live together happily. Oh really? It's a pity for you. What do you mean? That I inherited everything. It means, despite his wealth, he didn't consider you at all. Oh, that? I don't really care. You're just acting tough. There's a will saying not to give you a single penny. So, this house and any other lands he owned are all mine. I renounced the inheritance, so hearing this now doesn't affect me. Besides, Dad told me not to inherit anything while he was alive. Why would he say that? Who knows? Maybe he wanted to leave everything to you, Ted. I can't understand Dad's true intentions. Right, he probably said that because he wanted his real son to inherit. Just like Camila said. She said that too? Yeah, she said it would be pitiful if his stepmother took the inheritance. That the money left by a father should all go to his child. I agree with her. Well, I don't mind. I'll forget all the nagging you did. Just because you gave up the inheritance willingly. Thanks for that. Don't contact me ever again, no matter how poor you become. We are strangers now, whatever happens. Don't worry, Ted. Whatever happens, take care. Thus, Ted called me, ostensibly to report the completion of the inheritance, but really seeking a sense of superiority, thinking I would be upset. Of course, I wasn't upset or resentful. Furthermore, I thought I would never contact him again. That's what I believed. However, I didn't contact him, but after a while, Ted reached out to me. Mom, what should I do? Oh, I thought we were no longer mother and son. It's troubling to be called Mom all of a sudden. Don't be so mean. What happened? The house has been seized. Oh, I see. You're taking this rather lightly. It's only natural that it happened. What do you mean by that? I don't know what basis Camila had for saying you were a millionaire, but Dad had more debts than assets. You're kidding. It's not a joke. That's why the house was seized. I don't understand. If that's true, why did Dad leave me the inheritance? It's more like he left you the debts as well. Debts are part of the inheritance, you know. You would have understood if you had listened to the lawyer during the inheritance proceedings. But you didn't listen, did you? But Camila said we were millionaires. Dad had a fortune, so we wouldn't have to worry about anything. That's why I thought there was no need to listen to the lawyer. Oh dear, that's what happens when you take someone's word for it without checking for yourself. That's why I always told you to verify things before believing what people say. I taught you that, but you still fell into a big trap. I can't believe it. You thought I was just being a mean stepmother, right? That's why you only saw me as nagging. Too bad for you. But Camila is his mistress. If his mistress says it, it must be true, right? It wasn't true, though, was it? Yeah, but, so that's why you told me not to inherit the estate. It might be. Why didn't you tell me about it then? Your father used to call you a foolish son, you know? No matter how strictly I spoke to you, you never listened and were always out playing. He thought you would eventually learn the hard way. This is too painful. True, but they say the struggles of youth are worth buying. Isn't this just the right experience for you? It's not good at all. But you have Camila, right? You'll support each other. She's an adult, so she'll surely help you. That's true, but... Does Camila know about this? No, she's at work right now. Oh, she's working? Apparently. I thought she might quit her job once you inherited. Do you know about Camila? You said considering it's her. Not much. But I do wonder if she really was his mistress. Everything will probably come out in the open eventually. What? Anyway, struggles in youth are valuable. Just keep at it. I won't struggle. There must still be plenty of assets left, just the house was seized. If that's the case, I can just buy a new house with the other inheritance Dad left. I hope that works out for you. Is that all you wanted to talk about? Yeah. Then I'll hang up. I'm busy too, I said, ending the call abruptly. That night, after returning from work, Camila contacted me. Hey you! Oh, what a surprise. And who might you be? It's Camila. The one Daniel loved, Camila. Oh, I see. You seem quite panicked. Of course, I'm panicking. Why is the house being seized? I don't live there, so how would I know? Why are both of you asking me? But Daniel was supposed to have an estate worth over $1 million. Why is this happening? You didn't take the inheritance, did you? Of course not, I renounced the inheritance. How could I possibly take it then? I don't know about that. Maybe you did something? That's impossible. I'm not a magician. Maybe you secretly took the best part of the inheritance first, leaving us with nothing? It's quite a thought. With a lawyer involved, how could that even be possible? Well, that's true, but... Thinking like that, are you suggesting you might do something like that, Camila? I would never. How rude. Whatever you heard from my husband, he only had negative assets. And the amount was up to $1 million. But he used to be a millionaire before. That was before you two split, right? Huh. He failed in business after you split. Since then, everything he tried just didn't work out, and his debts only increased. That's why he told me to renounce the inheritance before he passed away. You know about me. Of course, I know. The whole Mr. story is just a blatant lie, isn't it? You're Ted's real mother, aren't you? How did you figure that out? I thought it was odd when I first heard you were his mistress. I've seen a photo of his ex-wife, and she was a very modest woman. But you're quite flashy. You didn't seem like the type he'd have as a mistress. However, I did think your face looked familiar. As we talked, I noticed how much you resemble Ted, almost like a mother and son. Well, of course, you are mother and son. The memory of the modest you and the present you overlapped, and I realized you were the same person. You've changed quite a bit, haven't you? I've been through a lot. Well, that's beside the point. If you're his real mother, why didn't you just say so? Ted would have been happy to know that. There's a lot going on. Always a lot. But my husband said something before he died. He said, when I'm gone, my ex-wife will probably show up. Is that so? Yes, it was exactly as he predicted. However, the way you showed up was quite unexpected. He also said you would likely sweet-talk your way into Ted's good graces. That prediction was spot on too. Quite the foresight for an ex-couple. But he did ask me to keep quiet about this. If you knew I was his mother, why didn't you say anything? Just because he asked you to stay quiet doesn't mean you have to follow everything he said. I didn't think it was necessary to say anything. If he left such instructions, there must have been a reason for it. But why are you deceiving Ted like this? No matter how much you say there's a lot going on, it's just too much and not convincing. I am his mother, after all. I never wanted to deceive my own child. But now, what good would it do to suddenly claim I'm his mother? If I said that, he would surely resent me. I'm the woman who abandoned him. If he hated or resented me, I'd miss out on the inheritance. Oh, it sounded like a touching story at first, but so your real concern is the inheritance? Of course. I thought there was a fortune of millions. By getting close to him and playing the part of a kind woman, I thought I could get my hands on his inheritance. Really, as his wife, I should have been the one to receive the inheritance. I see, so claiming to be a mistress was a strategic move to usurp the inheritance. Exactly. It was a perfect plan. Normally, the existence of a mistress would cause resentment. Thanks to you. Me? You were so strict with him that Ted couldn't understand what true kindness is. He ended up thinking superficial kindness is the real thing. So, even as a mistress, if someone shows him a bit of kindness, he sees them as a good person. Really, you did a great job with disciplining him. For that, I am grateful. I see, so he's a foolish son. Did you convince him that I was just a housekeeper? Exactly. I was impressed that his father didn't think highly of you. It was easy. If he felt his father also disapproved of him, his affection for his father would increase, but his feelings for you would plummet. And that's exactly what happened. He believed everything I said. So my efforts to raise him well backfired. I read so many books on education, but in the end, a book is just a book. Of course. People are different. You can't just apply what's in a book to everyone. It's all about the carrot and the stick. Indeed, it's a learning experience for me now. People, especially children, are swayed by superficial kindness. I thought I had explained things well to him. But I failed. It's just a case of an estranged parent and child. I won. This isn't about winning or losing. What are you going to do now? Now that you know the inheritance is negative? That's obvious, Camila said without elaborating further and hung up the phone. Left with a conversation that ended abruptly, I felt frustrated but decided it wasn't my place to say anything more and chose to forget about it. For about a week after that, everything seemed peaceful. I assumed Camila was supporting Ted. After all, they were mother and son, and surely she wouldn't neglect her distressed son. That was my thought. However, just over a week later, Ted showed up at my apartment. Wow, you found out where I live? Yeah. I researched it. I realized then that he had some sense after all. I thought he was a foolish child, but it seems he's developed some ability to think things through. So how's everything? Camila is gone. Gone? What do you mean? I haven't seen her for a week. Maybe she's on a trip? She hasn't come here? Of course not. Are you worried because she's gone? Yeah, because she said we were going to live together. If she suddenly disappears, anyone would be anxious, right? I wondered if that was the only reason. Or if it was the blood connection seeking her out. Did she leave any letter or note? Nothing. It'd be better if there was something. Well, she's actually your real mother. What? What are you talking about? That's the truth. Don't say stupid things. I talked to her on the phone recently, and she clearly said it. My real mother, and she left me again? Well, whether she left you or not, I don't know. She left me once before, and probably did it again. What am I supposed to do now? Some debt collection notices have started coming. You have to pay them. If she's my mother, shouldn't she also be responsible for paying? No, she's not responsible. Why not? She was Dad's wife. Even if they were separated, they still loved each other, right? That's not how it works. She wasn't actually his mistress. What do you mean? She claimed to be the mistress just to get a hold of the inheritance. What are you talking about? It's complicated. Then she should have just said she was my mother. Seems she thought she might be resented and lose the chance to get the inheritance. That's ridiculous, or maybe not. As expected of a parent and child. Regardless, now that you've inherited the estate, you have to pay up, Ted. I figured as much. Hey, you're his mom, too. Can't you help me out here? I'm a stranger to you, aren't I? Besides, I renounced my inheritance. That means I didn't inherit any of the debt either. You're the one who inherited it, Ted. And you're the one who told me never to get involved again. So, I have no intention of doing so. That woman knew everything and left me to escape, didn't she? I don't know, but maybe. That's what it is, it must be. Ted, you're a lot like her. What do you mean? You only think about yourself. That's why things turned out this way. I tried to teach you. If you don't have a heart for others, when you're in trouble, you're the one who ends up getting hurt. Oh! Ted looked at me and said, so that's what it was. As he slumped his shoulders. The estate left by my husband was seized and auctioned off. The debt was a hefty amount, but still, it all fell on Ted's shoulders. Without a place to live or any money, Ted ended up dropping out of college to work. However, Ted, who never minded causing trouble for others, managed to scrape by with odd jobs but was nowhere close to paying off his debts. Eventually, seeing no way out, he chose bankruptcy, laughing it off as a last resort. This led him into a miserable life, and he even stopped working, resenting his deceased father and wondering why he alone had to suffer like this. Despite knowing that not working would only make things worse for himself, he seemed oblivious to such common sense. I couldn't help but think what a foolish son he was. Moreover, my son, Ted, had come up with the idea of becoming a gigolo. He thought he'd find a woman to support him. But, to do that, one would need a certain level of charm, wouldn't they? Shallow-minded Ted, always thinking only of himself and neglecting others, insisted solely on his own rights. As a result, even the girlfriend he had managed to find eventually left him. This led to him being unable to pay his apartment rent, and ultimately, he fell into homelessness. As for me, my late husband had been depositing about $2,000 into my account every month before he passed, so I never had any financial troubles. Thanks to that, I've been able to live in a small apartment and quickly found a job, leading a peaceful life. Now, more than ever, I am grateful for the depth of my husband's love. Oh, well, that's good then. My grandmother said, but I couldn't really understand the meaning of her words. After taking my talented brother with them, my parents left this house. Because I'm stupid, I was the only one left behind. Now everyone's gone, and I'm lonely and all alone. Was I abandoned by my mom and dad? Yet, my grandmother raised me with deep affection. Delicious food and warm smiles. I learned how happy it is to be accepted just as I am. Then, after living freely for over 20 years, my parents appeared before me. They came back after seeing me, now an accomplished researcher, in the media. They didn't hide their desires, approaching me with an ugly smile. I felt a boiling anger inside, witnessing their actions. Seeing them in such a desperate situation due to their own actions. The sight of them with their vile smiles, uttering words of fake praise like "you're amazing," or frantically spitting while screaming a daughter has a duty to help her parents, was so repulsive that it was hard to put my feelings into words. I felt an intense boiling sensation inside me, while my mind seemed to become sharper. These people haven't changed at all. They believe only their values are correct, using them to justify excluding others and rationalizing any kind of tyranny. Without a thought for the people they hurt. Don't make me laugh. Coming to me now, just because you need something. So, I won't hold back anymore. I've already been walking my own path in life. I can't think of people who neglected me my whole life as family. I have no attachment to them. The time had come to tell my parents what I had always wanted to say. I renounce all inheritance and declare estrangement. I'm Jessica, a 29-year-old researcher. Ever since I was young, I loved playing outside, running around in mud, puddles, and sandpits until I was covered in dirt. When my science teacher talked about microorganisms, the idea of something invisible yet present fascinated me. Though invisible to the naked eye, each looked completely different under a microscope. I wanted to see things I'd never seen before, so I asked for a picture book from the bookstore, but it wasn't enough. We didn't have a microscope at home, and I couldn't always use one at school. Seeing my disappointment, my teacher taught me about the work of microorganisms. For example, they eat fallen leaves and live in mud. Since leaves in mud were easy to find, I ended up getting muddy while playing outside as I searched for the results of microorganisms' activity. Jessica, why do you always dirty your clothes? How many times do I have to tell you the same thing? My mother would scold me every time I came home with dirty clothes. But I'd forget when I was playing. Especially, my mother wanted me to engage in more traditionally feminine activities. She would say, "You're a girl, so wear a dress and play house." Playing outside isn't something girls should do. Because I preferred the exact opposite kind of play, I often got scolded by her. My tendency to get absorbed in things to the point of ignoring everything else was a problem at school too. During home visits, my teacher would comment, "Jessica often has trouble concentrating in class and can be found daydreaming. She gets easily distracted by things and tends to lose focus." My mother would smile awkwardly, apologize, and gently tell me, "Let's study hard." But as soon as the teacher left, she'd pull my arm and yell at me in a shrill voice. But I just found classes boring. The classes were often hard to follow, with teachers just rattling off content as they pleased, so I, just listening, would get bored. Then my mind would wander to more interesting things. That's how it felt. That's why my test scores were always hit or miss. I'd score near perfect on some, and then end up in the 20s on others. My inconsistency meant my report card was a mixed bag. The teachers at school would say, "It's way better to have interests, even if it means varying effort, than to have none at all." But having even one subject below average was unforgivable to my parents. They'd throw my report card aside with disgust, saying, "A fool has no place in this house." My parents were always boasting about their own excellence. My mom, a teacher at a competitive high school, took pride in having attended a university with high academic standards. She believed that good grades and getting into a top university were necessary for a great life. I noticed that people around her were somewhat put off by her rigid values, but my mom either didn't realize it or didn't care, even if she was told. In today's world, it's an educational society. Where you graduated from matters a lot. Anyone who doesn't get that is just a sore loser. It would have been better if she just looked down on others, but she was aggressive towards anyone with a differing opinion, so it was best to avoid conflict. My dad was similar. He graduated from medical school and became a medical researcher, often talking about his work at the university hospital and writing papers. He firmly believed academic background defined a person's worth, often demeaning patients and faculty from other departments based on their alma maters. So, to them, my situation was embarrassingly unacceptable. Unfortunately, I had a brother who was the exact opposite of me. He was the perfect child my parents wanted, obeying them and excelling in school. He got luxurious, nutrition-focused meals and high-quality clothes. I was the opposite. My meals were leftovers from what my brother and parents had. My clothes were either too small or hand-me-downs from my brother. Once I started prioritizing outdoor play over house play, the frequency of getting new clothes dropped significantly. My brother and I were treated differently based on our parents' values. But I still loved my brother, and he was kind to me. My brother, burdened with a ton of workbooks from our parents, was always at his study desk, but he'd help me with my homework and even share his snacks with me, knowing I didn't get any. We both understood, without saying it, that it wasn't wise to go against our parents. The worst came when I was 9. My parents, busy with their work and my brother's education, gradually treated me as if I were invisible. "Fend for yourself," my parents said, and they stopped preparing my meals. While my parents and brother were eating, I was locked in my room under the pretext of doing homework. I was allowed out when my brother went to take a bath, and then I would eat whatever I could find in the refrigerator. For clothes, I wore whatever was clean and available. However, my muddy clothes were often rejected even from the laundry and left on the floor. Conspicuously, a tablet was placed, showing videos on how to use the washing machine, and I learned to do my laundry by watching them. I remember feeling relieved that nobody commented when I managed it myself. There were days when I didn't see my parents at all. They were always busy with work, and on their days off, they focused on my brother. Even if we crossed paths inside the house, there was no eye contact. No response to my attempts at conversation. So, I gradually stopped trying to talk, and my parents continued to ignore my existence even more. They read all the school handouts and provided everything I needed for school. So, I just thought that was how things were supposed to be. I guess my teachers, being colleagues of my mother, didn't think she would go to such lengths. There was never any communication about it. Then one day, when I came back from school, I found a note on the living room table in our deserted house. "Your brother is going to a new school. We've made this house livable for you." At first, I didn't understand. I had heard from my brother himself that he might be transferring to another school. It seemed it wasn't final at that time, but I guess my parents had arranged everything. But the note said they had made the house livable for me. I read it over and over until I finally realized that I was being left behind. My parents were going with my brother, leaving the house for me, implying that they didn't need me. When I realized that, tears started to roll down my cheeks. I was just so sad. Because I wasn't good at studies. Because I didn't obey. Because I dirtied my clothes. No matter how hard I tried to get my parents' attention, doing good things and behaving well, once I did something wrong in their eyes, I was completely ignored. So, I was abandoned, and that fact was unbearably sad. I cried out loud, wailing. As it got dark outside and I grew tired of crying, I started to think again. It's impossible for a 9-year-old child to live alone. Even if I had a house, what about food? Without money, I couldn't do anything. And I didn't want to be alone. Then I remembered. When I was little, I used to visit my grandparents often. They were my mother's parents, and I often stayed at their house. My grandmother worked as a caretaker at a foster home, a short drive away, and I have memories of going there with her. There were many kids my age, and I'm sure we played together. I think it was the year before last, my grandfather passed away, and my grandmother started living alone in that big house. At that time, my mother and grandmother had some kind of falling out, and I stopped going to my grandparents' house or seeing my grandmother. My grandmother was alone too. With that thought, I desperately searched for my grandmother's contact information. All I remembered was my mother's maiden name, my grandmother's last name. Relying on just that, I searched desperately all over the house and finally found it. In an old handwritten contact book under the landline phone. There was my grandmother's last name and phone number. I had never made a phone call myself before. But it was like clutching at straws. I pushed the numbers on the contact book, but realized I needed to lift the receiver for it to work after doing it 3 times. I picked up the receiver, pressed it to my ear, and dialed the number. I heard the ringing tone, and after a few rings, the line clicked, cutting off the sound. "Yes, hello? Grandma." Jessica." "Grandma." She immediately recognized it was me and, right there on the phone, I managed to explain the situation I was in. Then, Grandma said, "I'll come right away," and hung up. Soon after, she came to pick me up in her car. When she saw me as I opened the front door to greet her, she seemed to catch her breath. She must have been shocked by my shabby appearance, but I was too filled with relief to care. There she was, the kind grandmother I remembered, right in front of me. I was so happy, I just threw myself into her arms. "Your beautiful hair, and your clothes." As she hugged me tightly, Grandma said this, stroking my hair. Her touch was so gentle, it made me even happier. "Come on, grab what you need, and let's go to my place," Grandma said, patting my back. She was taking me to live with her. "Yeah. Mom and Dad, they're not coming back, are they?" I hesitated for a moment, feeling as if leaving this house would truly sever my ties with my family. Even though I had just cried so much about being abandoned. But still, there was a part of me that was clinging to hope. "I'm just a silly girl they didn't want." "Well, isn't that good?" Grandma said. I didn't understand what she meant by that and looked up at her. "You're free now, Jessica. You're free. What do you want to eat? I'll make it. What do you want? What do you want to do?" Free. Of course, we'll have some basic rules since we'll be living together. Just to make sure neither of us feels bad or has a hard time, okay? Yeah. Apart from that, you're free. Do lots of things you like, have fun. That's what you can do now. Her words warmed something inside me. Being free to have fun. I wasn't quite sure what that life would be like, but an exciting expectation was growing inside me. Afterward, I moved in with my grandma and transferred to a new school. It was a peaceful rural area where Grandma lived, and the school was small with few students. Maybe because of that, being a new student was a novelty, and everyone was kind to me. The teachers paid close attention to each student, and I no longer got scolded like before. "Jessica, you have things you like, that's great. Research the things you're interested in. There should be books in the library. But remember, balance is important. Pay attention in class, finish your homework. Then you can do lots of things you like." Everyone accepted me. They helped me when I didn't understand something. They didn't deny who I was. I think before, I was never really seen for who I am. But now, they just naturally accepted me as I am. So, I started to smile a lot more. And near Grandma's house, it was like a treasure trove for me. It was a place where ancient fossils and buried forests had been discovered, and although no major excavation work was being done now, remnants must still be there. Above all, I wondered what kind of microorganisms had lived and worked in that land. What kind of effects did they have? What were the layers of the earth like? Did different things live in each layer? There was so much I wanted to know. Every day, I got covered in mud, running around exploring everywhere. Once, while digging out of curiosity, I found something like a fossil and was thrilled. Every day was exciting, full of discoveries, and fulfilling. I naturally came to think that this was something I wanted to continue doing for a long time. 20 years have passed since my parents left me behind. Now, at 29, I'm working in a research job, specializing in biology. Raised by my grandmother, after high school, I went on to college for 4 years to earn my bachelor's degree, followed by a master's and doctorate, totaling another 4 years. I successfully defended my doctoral thesis and obtained my PhD, landing a job at a well-regarded research institute right out of school. Right after taking me in, my grandmother somehow got in touch with my mother and insisted she pay for my education and upbringing. Naturally, my mother was reluctant, but Grandma threatened to consult child services, the police, and hire a lawyer to sue her if she didn't fulfill her obligations. Worried about their reputation, my parents begrudgingly transferred the bare minimum amount of money to my grandmother. Of course, that wasn't enough for tuition, so I used grant-type scholarships and honors student programs to complete my studies as quickly as possible. Now, I'm working on things I've always been interested in, like fossil excavation, understanding the conditions and age of the land, making my life quite fulfilling. Although research institutes are known for their excessive overtime, often exceeding 100 hours a month, I don't differentiate between working hours and overtime. I research to satisfy my curiosity. I use numerous methods to find answers. It feels like there's just not enough time for the simple act of learning. Of course, some colleagues have left, unable to endure this environment, but for me, the job is enjoyable without any hardship. Being nicknamed a physical and mental powerhouse at work is something I take as a compliment. Having been denied the chance to do what I wanted and my feelings negated in the past, I relish the opportunity to delve into my interests and make new discoveries in this job. Since childhood, I've been intensely interested in one thing, which often became a target of criticism from adults, but now, I can use this trait effectively in my work. My grandmother helped me learn how to manage this trait, turning it into a strength that I could use as my weapon. As a result, I understood how to study efficiently, improving my grades. I did well in my entrance exams and could fully utilize this trait in my research. I organize and prioritize multiple tasks in my head, completing them one by one. The sensation of my brain nearly boiling over as I scrutinize information and find answers brings an indescribable pleasure. This job is indeed suited for me. Recently, I received an award from a prestigious society for discovering and elucidating the unique functions of a rare microorganism found in the sand samples I analyzed during an overseas fossil excavation. It all started with my curiosity about why this microorganism was present in that particular stratum. As I unraveled the mystery through research, I learned about its critical role in evolution, prompting me to quickly write and submit a paper. This discovery kept me abroad longer than expected, and I got tied up in non-research related meetings and media interviews, consuming extra time, but I managed to return to the States. Just when I thought I could return to the Institute to continue my other research, I was ordered by the director to take a few days off as a reward, delaying my plans. Since these opportunities are rare and there's not much else to do, I decided to visit my grandmother. So, I headed straight to her place from the airport. You've been busy again, haven't you? Not really. It's more that the non-work stuff is bothersome. Ah, I saw you on TV. That party. You were wearing such a lovely dress. I was just dressed up and made up against my will. You looked like a completely different person than the usual Jessica. I was just tired. Grandma's pumpkin stew is still the best. That's good to hear. If you want more, help yourself. Sure. Arriving at my grandmother's house, I relaxed in the living room with her delicious pumpkin stew and tea. Grandma still lives alone in this house, and although she's getting on in years, she remains active, working in the garden. I hope she stays healthy and energetic for a long time. Just then, the doorbell rang. Huh? The mail? That's unusual. My grandmother stood up and headed towards the entrance. Since I was little, this area has always been sparsely populated. The neighbors, who know each family's composition, rarely use the intercom for visits due to their close-knit nature. Even now, the only people who diligently ring the doorbell are delivery personnel. Since my grandmother never uses online shopping, I was wondering what could have been delivered. I could hear the sound of her slippers scraping the floor and the front door opening. I thought Grandma would return immediately after receiving the package, but she didn't come back right away. Instead, there seemed to be some commotion at the entrance. Sensing the uneasy atmosphere, I decided to go to the entrance myself. Ah, Jessica! As I left the living room and peeked down the hallway to the entrance, I heard someone calling my name. Behind my turning grandmother, at the door, stood a man and a woman. It was the woman who had called my name. Jessica, I'm so glad. I wanted to see you. Ah, Jessica. Come here. At first, I didn't recognize them. After all, it had been 20 years since I last saw them. The two people, desperately calling my name with forced, ugly smiles, were my significantly aged father and mother. Why are they here? What do they want? After 20 years of no contact. After they abandoned me 20 years ago. Karen! You and John have no face to show Jessica. My grandmother raised her voice at my mother. Just stay out of it, Mom. Jessica is my daughter. You never acted like a parent, how dare you? Jessica, come here. Let's celebrate. You've done well. My parents exclaimed in unison, still yelling. Observing my parents' commotion, I realized they knew about my recent award. They probably didn't expect me to be here, but the only connection they had to me was through my grandmother. So, they came here, and by a stroke of bad luck for me, or good luck for them, they found me visiting. Keep it down, you're disturbing the neighbors. I stated firmly, and my parents stiffened and closed their mouths. They seemed to be somewhat aware of their absurd behavior. I won't let you inside the house. Just explain briefly why you are here. If you make any more noise or trouble, I'll call the police right away. Now, speak. When I urged them to talk, my parents exchanged glances and then began their story. Things changed for my brother after he entered college. He got into one of the top universities, as my parents had hoped, but there he encountered values different from those of our parents for the first time. Bright students have strong wills and aspirations. Seeing his peers pursuing various dreams, my brother began to doubt the academic elitism he had been indoctrinated with, and grew to despise our parents' abnormal obsession with educational credentials. My brother disappeared during his senior year of college, leaving a note saying, "Don't look for me." He's still missing to this day. After being abandoned by my brother, who they had invested so much time, effort, and money in, my parents went on a spending spree in their turmoil. To me, it made no sense, but maybe they were trying to fill the void of loneliness with other things. I wanted to say they should have been more concerned about my brother, but I realized once again these people couldn't possibly have such feelings. Naturally, their savings dwindled, and it impacted their real lives. They started lashing out at others at their workplaces. My mother, a teacher, was overly strict with her students and excessively interfered with their futures, eventually causing several students to stop attending school. She also harassed and verbally abused younger colleagues, leading to recordings of her actions being submitted to the education board, resulting in disciplinary action. Both parents are being threatened with lawsuits by lawyers from both sides. My father, too, behaved similarly. Looking down on colleagues with lower educational backgrounds, he made unbearable remarks and acted high-handedly. Not only that, but he also treated hospital patients in the same manner, and even made advances towards female patients he fancied. It seems he'll soon be facing legal issues for that as well. I felt they had reached their limit, with no one to stop them. My parents, with tears in their eyes, explained their situation and then leaned towards me. "Jessica, we want to live together, as a family, supporting each other. Right? You were really our daughter after all. You've done so well. Yes, amazing. You must be famous in your field by now. With fame comes authority. From now on, support each other? What do you mean?" That was an unforgivable remark. Support each other? Now, after all this time? But we're family. I interrupted my parents' words with a question, shocking them. Family? What do you mean by that? What do you mean? We might share genes, but we're not a family, are we? Why would you say that? My mother's voice grew louder, trying to stop me. I even felt a sense of nostalgia in that unchanged voice of hers. And then I realized, I'm not afraid of them anymore. Not even a little bit. Also, stop twisting things to your convenience. You're only here because you're facing huge compensations you can't pay, right? You're relying on me? But is it because my brother is gone, and now it's my turn? Or is it because you've run out of money to the point where you have to rely on the daughter you abandoned? As I spoke calmly, my father was speechless. But my mother glared at me with wide eyes. Jessica, how can you say that? We're family, we should support each other. You're just shocked because we haven't seen each other in so long, right? Don't worry. From now on, we'll live together, and we can adapt to each other's pace. That's a joke. Absolutely not, I refuse. I don't want to talk to you ever again. Please leave. I reflexively said that when they mentioned living together. Even as my parents started yelling and screaming, my heart remained cold. Jessica, how can you talk to your parents like that? Hurry up and pack your things. Take us to your house. My parents' words became increasingly rough. Even though I said I didn't want to live together, they intended to barge into my home. It made me chuckle. In fact, it seemed that my expression reflected that sentiment. Somehow, I felt a faint smile forming. Just as you treated me like I'm not your child, I've never thought of you as parents. To suddenly be told by strangers that we're a family and should live together is nothing but terrifying. Your child is just your son. I want nothing to do with you from now on. I don't even want to be invited to the funeral. I thought to myself, so this is what it means for your blood to boil. My gut was heating up, and it felt like my blood pressure was rising. However, my mind remained calm. It was as if a cool breeze was sweeping through my thoughts. It's something I've thought about for a long time. Cutting ties might be necessary for inheritance issues that might arise in the future, but severing the parent-child relationship would be impossible. However, if I cut ties in practice and simply didn't communicate, that should work. Finally, my parents turned red in the face and started yelling. "What are you doing, acting on your own? Who do you think paid for everything? Daughters have an obligation to help their parents. Do you understand how incredibly ungrateful you sound?" Once again, my parents began to yell, and I could only sigh. I wondered how I could make them understand. "Do you seriously think that just by giving money, you can call yourselves parents?" My grandmother said it in a calm voice. I thought she was absolutely right. To me, those people weren't parents. Being a parent is a fact, isn't it? That's right. It seemed my grandmother's words didn't reach them. They continued to make incomprehensible claims loudly. My grandmother sighed at their persistently loud and incomprehensible arguments and turned on her heel. My parents were still shouting. At that moment, I suddenly heard a police siren getting louder and louder. I wondered if there had been an accident, but the car stopped in front of my grandmother's house. Police officers got out of the car, and there was a crowd of people around the patrol car. Even in this rural area, if a loud argument like this happened, the neighbors would notice it quickly. It seemed they had called the police thinking it was a major incident. Despite being in the countryside, my parents seemed greatly flustered by the appearance of the police. They put on unnaturally friendly smiles and stammered in their responses. When I explained to the police that my parents left with only my older brother, and today, for the first time in 20 years, they said they want to live together, the people around us started to murmur. My parents glared at me, but their response seemed to make the situation more believable. The police officers kept my parents away and, in the meantime, we closed the front door and locked all the doors. As expected, my parents didn't come to the house afterward. I heard from the neighbors that my seemingly nice parents had a conversation with the police for a while, and then they left as if nothing had happened. After that, several days passed, but there was no sign of my parents. It seems that even the neighbors are keeping an eye out, but it seems that the two of them haven't come near this area. Could it be that they just came to visit me as a last resort? I had to return home before the vacation ended, and I had relaxed a little, when a visitor came to my grandmother's house again. "Hey, long time no see, Jessica. Big brother." A man with a sun-kissed tan and long hair, casually tied up, stood there. I realized at his mouth when he called my name and smiled. Standing at the entrance was my brother, who had gone missing just a while ago and hadn't been heard from for several years. I brought my brother into the living room and listened to the details. While interacting with various people in college, my brother became aware of our parents' abnormality and had been patiently waiting for an opportunity to escape from that house while working part-time. He had accumulated enough funds, and when the time was right, he left the country. His goal was to see various people and various parts of the world. While traveling around the world, he worked locally, and he said he took many photos. When he posted those photos on social media, a publishing company contacted him, asking if he wanted to open a photography shop. He accepted the offer in exchange for them providing him with photography jobs, and that's why he had returned to the States after several years. "When I was in Rome, I happened to see you on the news, Jessica." "Oh, from when I won the award?" "Yeah, that's right. You mentioned Grandma in the interview, didn't you?" "I came back to the States because I wanted to see Grandma, but I also wanted to meet you, Jessica. So, I asked Grandma for your whereabouts. It worked out perfectly." My brother laughed cheerfully, but then he straightened up and looked at me seriously. "Jessica, I'm really sorry for everything up until now." "Huh? Why are you saying this all of a sudden?" "It's not sudden. I've been wanting to apologize to you every time I saw you." My brother wasn't smiling at all. I didn't really think much about it back then when we were living together in that house. We didn't have meals together, and on holidays, I was the only one our parents would take out. Even though there was an obvious difference in the clothes we wore, I didn't find it strange. I was just focused on my studies, and during that time, I thought we were just normal siblings who played together," he said, furrowing his brows and clenching his hands on his knees, shaking his head. When I mentioned having a sister to the people in my college seminar, sharing stories from our past, they were all shocked. That's when I finally realized that you had every reason to resent me. I should have gone to apologize immediately after leaving home. I shouldn't have procrastinated until a time like this. I'm sorry for living carefree while you were going through a tough life. He lowered his gaze. I really should have gone to apologize as soon as I left home. But I'm sorry I put it off until now. I'm sorry that I thought it was normal for you to live a normal life when you were going through such a hard time. His heartfelt apology made me consider resenting my brother for the first time. However, I couldn't summon any negative feelings towards him. I didn't harbor thoughts like why only me or why just my brother. At that time, I was preoccupied with our parents to the point where those thoughts rarely crossed my mind. I'm not angry, and I don't resent you. Back then, you were the only one who really talked to me," I said. My brother's face contorted in a pained expression upon hearing these words. As tears welled up in my brother's eyes, our grandmother approached with mittened hands holding a plate. "Would you both like to have some candied sweet potatoes?" It was my grandmother's homemade candied sweet potatoes, made from the ones she had harvested from her garden and prepared since yesterday. Knowing this, I couldn't help but smile at my grandmother's deliberate attempt to recreate the atmosphere of the past, as if we had returned to those days. "Wow, this brings back memories. I really want to eat some." "Yeah, Grandma's candied sweet potatoes are delicious, aren't they? I loved them when I was a kid." "I know. Please have as much as you want. Let's enjoy them together." Sitting across from each other at the table for the first time in a long time, we both indulged in the same dish. Just that simple act brought tears to our eyes. Despite the slightly salty taste, it was a precious moment. Afterwards, I learned that our parents had to bear a significant amount of compensation and had further scandals that made headlines, ultimately losing their jobs. Currently, they seem to be living a modest life, working alongside people they once looked down upon due to their lower educational backgrounds. They had to humble themselves before younger supervisors with only high school diplomas. It must have been a humiliating experience, but I believed it was a necessary lesson for them. My brother and I, who had been separated for 20 years, began to frequently communicate, share meals, and visit our grandmother's house together. I was truly happy to spend time with my brother as a family. Grateful for the moments we shared with our grandmother, my brother, and me, I felt content in both my personal and public life. Leaving a baby behind, where have you been all this time? I could hear crying outside the house the whole time, bellowed my neighbor, George, with his wife, Julia, visible behind him. Even as I received cold stares from Julia and the neighbors who gathered like arrows, I couldn't understand what was going on. And for good reason. I don't have a baby in my house?" I asked George, bewildered, and he looked at me in surprise. But George, insisting he heard a baby's cry, didn't back down. Similarly, the neighbors and Julia agreed, saying they too heard a baby. "Please don't lie. We definitely heard a baby crying." "But I don't even have grandchildren, I really don't know." It seemed my words weren't believed. Instead, the suspicion against me grew, as neighbors started giving me cold, hard stares. Then, the harassment worsened. Once, a paper labeled liar was stuck on my door, and a neighbor told me to stop causing trouble as we passed each other. Lately, I've been scared to even meet my neighbors, making going outside daunting. But that day, I had my annual health checkup, so I reluctantly went outside and hurried to the hospital. As I finished at the reception and waited, I saw a familiar face walking from the gynecology department. "Emily!" I couldn't help but call out her name. She was Emily Johnson, a childhood friend of David and the others. I ran up to her and started talking. Surprisingly, the truth she revealed became the key to solving this issue. "My name is Susan Miller. After graduating from high school, I married a man I met through a blind date arranged by my boss at work. He was 10 years older than me, and while we often didn't see eye to eye, we somehow made our marriage work. 2 years into our marriage, I was thrilled to find out I was pregnant with our son, David. I had believed my husband would be happy too, but instead, he grew distant, refusing to acknowledge David and eventually asked for a divorce. After the divorce, I learned from acquaintances that my husband had been having an affair with a young woman who had recently started working at his company. The revelation that he had been unfaithful and was unwilling to even pay child support for our son filled me with anger. However, for the sake of my precious son, I continued to work, switching jobs after the divorce and starting a new life. Having lost my parents at a young age and with few relatives to rely on or friends to confide in, I felt anxious about raising David on my own. But seeing his smiling face when I came home gave me the strength to keep going. David grew up to be a kind-hearted and earnest young man, excelling academically through elementary, middle, and high school, and was expected to go to a prestigious university. However, he decided not to pursue higher education. Despite his teachers advising him to go to college, I worked extra shifts to ensure we wouldn't struggle financially if he chose to go. But he didn't want to burden me and chose not to attend. As a single mother working late nights, I worried him. His unexpected decision brought me to tears. I had always hoped he would go to college and learn as much as possible. Ideally, as a mother, I should have been able to support him through college, but he couldn't bear to see me work so hard anymore. "Mom, I'm going to work too, so you don't have to worry about me anymore. I'm an adult now," he said. The thought of my son, who used to cry so much, worrying about me was incredibly touching. At the same time, I didn't want to make him worry any more than he already had. Once he started working, he began contributing to the household, which made it possible for me to work less. His stable job at a major company helped ensure a steady income. After 5 years of working, David married his childhood friend, Ria, a kind and caring woman who worried about me and suggested we live together. David had been talking to Ria about me since they got married. They even bought a new house for us all to live in together. So, I moved out of the cheap apartment I had lived in since the divorce and started living with David and his family. I'm so grateful to David, who has grown up and become a responsible adult. "Thank you for everything you've done for me," I said to him, filled with gratitude and guilt. He replied with the same smile he's always had, saying he was happy to live with me. "I want to give back to you for raising me on your own." I still remember tearing up at those words, deeply moved by my son's concern. Time has passed, and now David has been promoted and is doing well at work. I had hoped to see my grandchildren, but since both David and Ria work, they haven't had children yet. Still, I started saving money, hoping it would help them in the future. My hardships are a small price to pay if it benefits my grandchild someday. "You don't need to worry, Mom. I'm working too," David would say, looking concerned. I'd shake my head slightly and reply, "I want to work." Having savings for emergencies is important. There was a time in the past when my ex-husband secretly got into debt over his obsession with gambling. When the repayment day came, he couldn't pay back, and scary people even showed up at our house. That time, I managed to settle the situation by giving away all the savings I had made in place of my ex-husband. Since then, I've been diligently saving money, keeping it in my bank account for any emergencies. It was about a year and a half after I started my part-time job. That day, there was a family gathering, so I had been at my relative's house since morning. It had been years since our last meeting, so we had a lot of catching up to do, and time flew by quickly. Usually, Ria and I share household chores, but that day she suddenly had to work, leaving me in charge. I needed to prepare dinner before David and the others returned home. When I hurried back home, I noticed a familiar face standing in front of the house. There were a few neighbors and George, our next-door neighbor. As I rushed to the front of the house, wondering what had happened, George, noticing me, suddenly burst out in anger. "Where have you been all this time, leaving a baby alone? The baby has been crying outside the house the whole time." Behind George, who was yelling at me, I could see his wife, Julia. Faced with the cold stares of the neighbors and Julia, I was completely confused. There shouldn't be any baby crying at my house, as there were no children there. There's no baby at my house? I asked, perplexed. George looked at me in surprise. But he insisted that he had heard a baby crying. Agreeing with George, the neighbors and Julia also claimed they heard the baby's cries.
Don't lie. We definitely heard a baby crying.
But I don't have grandchildren either. I really don't know anything about it. My explanation didn't seem to convince them. Instead, the distrust towards me seemed to grow, and the neighbors started to glare at me coldly. In the end, no one listened to my side of the story. I decided to tell David and the others about the incident. David looked puzzled, but his wife, Rhea, just suggested it might have been a misunderstanding. But everyone heard the baby crying. Maybe it was the sound from the TV, or it could have been the vacuum cleaner that sounded like that. It's hard to believe that such sounds could be mistaken for a baby's cries. David didn't seem interested in identifying the source of the noise, just suggesting it was probably a mistake. As I struggled with my dissatisfaction, Rhea abruptly ended the conversation. If it's about ghosts, it's scary, right? Let's just drop this topic. Was Rhea always the type to cut into conversations and end them like this? But, faced with her cheerful voice, I couldn't say anything else. In the end, the cause remained unknown, and the topic was dropped. A few days later, as I was returning home from my part-time job as usual, I bumped into George and his wife. As we passed each other, I greeted them. But they didn't greet me back. Instead, George approached me angrily.
Enough is enough. Your baby is too loud.
As I said before, there's no baby at my house. Despite my words, George shook his head, insisting it was a lie, and began shouting in front of my house. The baby might be in danger. Don't scream at or hurt the baby, he irrationally accused. I pleaded with him to stop spreading baseless lies, but George wouldn't listen. As he continued to raise his voice in front of my house, neighbors started peeking out of their windows to see what was happening. Unable to withstand the stares of those around me, I eventually shouted out.
There's really no baby here. Please stop spreading lies.
As I said this, George glared at me intensely and spat out, "Liar," before walking away. I let out a small sigh over this baseless accusation. Why would they hear a baby's cry coming from my house? David and Rhea couldn't figure it out either, and it's not like Rhea had a secret child. The more I thought about it, the more it confused me, and I even started to get a headache. But the harassment from George and the others didn't stop there. Once, a paper labeled "liar" was stuck on my door, and another time a neighbor told me, "Stop causing trouble," as we passed each other. I tried discussing it with David, but we couldn't come up with any solution since neither of us had any clue. Amidst accumulating fatigue and worry, I continued with my daily life. Recently, I've been afraid to even meet my neighbors, making it hard to step outside. However, on that day, I had my annual health checkup and had to go out, so I quickly headed to the hospital. As I was waiting in the waiting room after registering, I saw a familiar face walking from the maternity ward.
Emily!
I instinctively ran up to her. She was Emily, a childhood friend of David and the others. When she saw me, she stepped back in utter surprise. As I approached her, I noticed she was holding a small sleeping baby in her arms. I hadn't heard anything about her getting married or pregnant from David, but it seemed she was now a mother. We used to play together with David and others, and she often came to our house. I was astonished to see that Emily, whom I hadn't met for so many years, now had a child. While surprised, I asked her when she got married. I got pregnant, so I got married. She had already had a small wedding with just family, and now she was busy with her new life as a mother. Having raised David on my own, I understood the challenges of parenting. I asked if she wanted to have tea, but she politely declined with a troubled smile. That's when I felt something was off. Emily used to be more approachable, always wearing a bright smile, and would excitedly run up to me whenever we met by chance. But now, she just showed a strange smile and seemed to avoid getting into deep conversations, quickly leaving. The Emily who used to chat with me so freely seemed to have grown up and lost the carefree smile of her younger days. Feeling a bit sad, I waved goodbye to Emily. When I returned home from the hospital, I found a bunch of papers in my mailbox, complaining about the noise of a baby. Sighing softly, I took out the papers, only to notice George and his wife Julia watching me.
Your kid is too loud. Just get out of here. Every day, it's so annoying.
I ran into the house to escape their yelling. Inside, I blocked my ears to avoid hearing their continued shouts. For over a month, they kept accusing me of things that had no basis in reality. I had reached my limit with the ongoing harassment from the neighbors. Unable to handle it anymore, I discussed it again with David and Ria when they returned from work that evening. I told them about the numerous verbal abuses from George and his wife and the increasingly severe harassment. I can't take their harassment anymore. I hate to leave this house, but could we consider moving? At first, I overlooked their behavior, but the recent harassment is just too much. David agreed, indicating he had been turning a blind eye to George's actions until now, but could no longer ignore them. I noticed Ria, sitting next to him, looking unhappy about the idea of moving. I'm against it. I don't want to move. David and I exchanged looks, surprised by Ria's unexpected reaction. We asked her why, and she explained that she didn't want to give up the house we had paid so much for. She said she didn't want to waste money buying a new place, especially since they were considering having children. But I couldn't stand the thought of enduring the endless harassment any longer. I'm absolutely against it. I can't imagine giving up something we've worked so hard for. Besides, my workplace is close to our home, and leaving here just isn't an option. I couldn't understand why Ria, who was always so kind, was being so adamantly opposed. Indeed, her current job was at a company she had longed to join, and both the work and the company culture seemed to suit her well. If we moved now, Ria might have to consider changing jobs, which could mean giving up work she loves. Me moving alone wouldn't solve anything. In the end, we didn't discuss moving any further, hoping instead that the harassment would stop. A few days later, I received a call about my health checkup results and, with a heavy heart, headed to the hospital. Fortunately, despite my age and David's concerns, there were no abnormalities found in my health. Relieved that the stress from the ongoing complaints hadn't manifested physically, I let out a small sigh while waiting for my bill. That's when I spotted a familiar face sitting with a baby in her arms. It was Emily, looking down at her baby with a dark expression and sighing repeatedly. Once so cheerful, I wondered what had happened to her. When I approached her, she seemed startled. She tried to speak but then awkwardly turned away. I sat down beside her, close enough to offer comfort. You seem down. Is something wrong? Emily shook her head and simply replied, "It's nothing." But her demeanor suggested she was hiding something. I looked directly at her and said, "Please, I want to help you. If you have any troubles, just talk to me." I couldn't believe such a once bright person could look so downcast. Finally, Emily seemed to resign herself to opening up, her voice heavy with resolve. "I'm a single mother. It's hard raising a child, working day and night, constantly worrying about money." I was speechless at her painfully honest revelation. But if she was working all day and night, I wondered who was taking care of her child. She couldn't find time for her child, struggling just to earn enough for childcare and living expenses. Who takes care of your child when you're working? Ria looks after my baby. I was taken aback by her unexpected answer. Ria works from morning till evening. How can she manage that with her job? Emily, looking down, started to explain how she was troubling Ria. Apparently, Ria was the only one who knew that Emily had a child out of wedlock. Worried about Emily raising her child alone, Ria had offered to help take care of the child. Suddenly, George's words about hearing a baby's cries came to mind.
Ria is looking after your child? Could it be?
Emily hesitantly nodded in confirmation. While David and I were away, Ria had been taking care of Emily's child at our house. All this time, I thought the accusations were baseless, never imagining a baby was actually crying. Feeling guilty for thinking it was all unfounded harassment, I exclaimed. Why didn't she talk to me about this? Even a little consultation would have been fine. Emily shook her head and said she would stop leaving her child with Ria. I can't burden Ria anymore. She's already attracting attention at work because of this. It seems that Ria had been taking time off work to care for Emily's child, but her increasing absences had begun to raise suspicions from her boss. Recently, it's become harder for her to take time off. Emily declared that she would no longer rely on Ria and would take care of her child alone. I couldn't just stand by and watch Emily struggle. I wanted to help her in Ria's stead. I longed to see her smile again, like she used to. With that determination, I offered to take care of Emily's child. There's no way I can just leave you struggling like this. Let me help. Emily, tears in her eyes and looking apologetic, thanked me. That very day, she explained the situation to Ria. This would relieve Ria of the need to take time off work to care for the child, and would alleviate Emily's parenting anxiety. I immediately discussed the situation with my workplace and managed to reduce my shifts, deciding to take care of the child. The child, still very young, was quiet, ate well, and slept soundly, but initially cried loudly upon realizing I was not their mother. It reminded me of David when he was young, bringing back nostalgic feelings. But there was no time to indulge in nostalgia. I had to inform George and the others about the real situation. Hey, I need to talk to you about something. I showed Emily the papers accusing us of lying about the baby's cries that George and his neighbors had been posting. Although she looked shocked, I explained the situation and suggested we go to George's house to apologize. Emily, unaware of the situation, looked remorseful, but I was sure George would understand once we explained. On another day, Emily and I went to George's house to discuss the matter. I hoped that a proper explanation and apology might stop the harassment. As we rang George's doorbell, he answered.
So, you've finally come to admit to the crying baby, you liar.
George shouted as soon as he saw us. Startled, I was about to speak, but it was Emily who raised her voice. Why are you here? She asked George, her face turning pale and tears beginning to form in her eyes. She moved protectively behind me. But it was George who showed the most panic.
Why are you here? I told you we were done with each other.
At the sight of Emily, George's anger was apparent. Julia also appeared, asking,
Who's that woman? And why is this liar here?
Overwhelmed by Julia's intensity, I opened my mouth to explain the situation. But just at that moment, Emily, who had appeared behind me, glared at Julia and shouted.
He's my ex-boyfriend. This child is his. He refused to acknowledge the child.
At Emily's harsh words, not only Julia but also I were left stunned, turning our gaze to George in disbelief. It turns out George had been dating Emily a few years ago and was cheating on her with Julia. Emily, unaware of this, had told George about her pregnancy, but he chose young Julia over her, refusing to acknowledge the child and abandoning them. He had even changed his contact details, leaving Emily to raise the child alone without any support. Julia, her face turning red with anger, directed her fury at George.
What do you mean? I was the other woman. Don't joke with me.
Julia screamed at George, who frantically tried to explain himself. I was appalled by the whole scene.
If I had known it would come to this, I would have kicked them out sooner.
George yelled, pointing at me. He started to explain. Apparently, George had accidentally discovered that Ria and Emily were childhood friends, and had seen Ria taking care of his child. Panicking, George had been trying to drive us out before Emily could learn about his marriage to Julia.
It's your fault for coming here. If you had left, I wouldn't be in this mess.
George's selfish reasoning made me sigh. He had deceived both Emily and Julia, neglecting not only pregnant Emily but also his own child, living comfortably himself. But then, it was Emily who spoke up.
Do you have any idea how much suffering you've caused me? And to think, you cheated not just on me but with someone else too.
Emily's words, spoken in a cold tone, visibly drained the color from George's face. "It's all in the past," George replied quietly, only to be interrupted by Julia, who began to gather her belongings, glaring at him.
"This is over, George. You cheated and had a child without telling me? That's the lowest. If I had known, I never would have married you."
She declared her intention to leave. George, apparently caught off guard by Julia's reaction, desperately tried to stop her, but she spat out that she would divorce him and demand alimony. That day, we left George's house, unable to do anything further. Julia's outcry was so loud it seemed to have prompted complaints from the neighbors, and it appears they eventually divorced. Emily, too, consulted a lawyer about George's failure to pay child support. Thanks to all of you. I never even considered consulting a lawyer, thinking I had to do everything myself. It costs money and time, but I plan to have the lawyer calculate everything that's owed. George was eventually ordered to pay child support, including the back payments he had missed. He started working a second job, desperately trying to make enough money. Meanwhile, with less financial worry, Emily reduced her work hours, gradually increasing the time she could spend with her child. Emily and I have kept in touch, and I've been able to enjoy a good relationship with her and her child. Recently, I've noticed her smile returning, the one she had lost. With George and his family gone, a peaceful daily life has returned to us. After several months of this tranquil life, on a beautifully clear autumn day, I received exciting news from Ria about her pregnancy. David, who had longed for a child, was overjoyed at the prospect. It looks like our days are about to become busy again. I'm eagerly waiting for the arrival of my grandchild, enjoying a blissful life. Here comes the poor farmer's country bumpkin. When you think of a wedding, you imagine the couple wrapped in happiness, surrounded by family, friends, and loved ones, spending precious time together. Never would I have thought that I'd hear such demeaning words about my parents at such a beautiful occasion. Just being invited to attend my daughter's wedding, why should they be subjected to such cruel words? Right after, my usually quiet father said, "Let's go home." Yes. That one phrase seemed to set everything in motion. Both Emily and her husband would come to regret the words they carelessly uttered. I always said to take responsibility for your own words, and this truly applies to them. Being elite or whatever, it's useless if you forget what's important. People who don't understand the importance of gratitude need to be taught that there are consequences for such behavior. I'm Hannah Bongard, and I just turned 28 this spring. I live in what you'd call a regional city. I think I lead a convenient life. Most things are accessible by car, and most of my friends live nearby. I never found living in my hometown inconvenient. I'm not into flashy lifestyles, so it's just right for me. Since the field I wanted to study was available at a local college, I commuted from home. After graduating, I was hired by a local specialty food company and still live with my parents. I work hard on weekdays and enjoy shopping with friends or my mom on days off. It's not glamorous, but I find fulfillment in these days. I have an older sister, Emily, who has always been the opposite of me, so we haven't gotten along since we were young. Emily has always been interested in fashion. I could tell even as a kid that she was fascinated by the trend-setting lifestyle of New York. She filled her life with her own style and fashion, always enjoying her outfit of the day. I think she was one of those popular girls in school. Always flamboyant, surrounded by friends, enjoying fashion and makeup, I used to think Emily was amazing. I had no interest in fashion, preferring to enjoy my beloved books and daily studies. Meanwhile, Emily was the type who didn't care much for studies and was always focused on fashion. It's strange how different sisters can be, but I guess that's just how it is. I never thought much about our differences. But Emily seemed to feel ashamed of being related to plain me. She often made sarcastic remarks. An incident from our high school days still haunts me. One day, I brought Emily her forgotten lunchbox to her classroom. When I called her name, I saw her in the center of a loud group of boys and girls. "Hey sis, you forgot your lunchbox, so I brought it for you." Emily looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before and came over, glaring at me from the doorway. Snatching the lunchbox from my hand, she whispered something unbelievable.
"Don't talk to me outside like I'm your sister. It'd be embarrassing if people knew you're my sister."
"Just bringing a forgotten item, and you say that." Then she raised her voice, waving the lunchbox, and returned to her group.
"I guess I left my lunch at the bike racks. Some underclassmen found it and brought it to me."
Laughing loudly, she intentionally let go of the lunchbox, making a loud crash.
"My parents said I don't need to bring lunch, but they made this boring one anyway. Can't eat this, let's go to the cafeteria."
Emily just walked off with her friends to the cafeteria, leaving behind the lunchbox. Despite our mom waking up early to make it along with mine, that lunchbox was just left lying there on the classroom floor, discarded. All I could do was stand there and stare at it. Since that incident, I've been keeping my distance from Emily. We don't really fight, but we don't chat much either. To me, it's just senseless and unbelievable to treat a lunch made with such care so carelessly, wasting it. But Emily doesn't seem to think so. If we can't understand each other, it's better to keep some distance. Emily often talked about wanting to go to New York, so after high school, she went off to a college there. Not that she had something she wanted to study in New York.
I can't stand the idea of spending my college years in such a backwater. I'm finally a college girl, I want to enjoy fashion and social clubs, you know?
It seemed like she just wanted an excuse to leave this area and our home. She chose her college based on the fancy name of the department and quickly moved out. After slacking off for 4 years, she joined the workforce, but people's true nature doesn't change after college. In fact, I feel like she's gotten worse. After college, she drifted apart from her friends and seemed to have no one to vent her work frustrations to. She started calling me more often, as if begging for someone to listen to her complaints. The things she talks about are so unbelievable, they give me a headache. Listen to this.
"My boss has no eye for talent, it's so annoying."
Calling in the middle of the night, "What's up?"
"It's just awful. The report I spent 5 days on? He won't use it."
Trying to calm down a loudly complaining Emily on the phone, I listened to her rant. "He won't use it? Did something happen?"
"He said the format wasn't right, but come on.
If it's not the right format, why not just redo it as instructed?"
"But I don't really get it.
More importantly,
Isn't it terrible that he won't use it even though I worked so hard?"
I understand that the end result is what matters, even if it took days to complete a task. But Emily just doesn't get it. She sees herself as a victim of a terrible boss who doesn't appreciate her hard work. Dealing with her woe is me attitude is just too much for me. I was getting fed up with her constant complaining when she dropped a bombshell. "By the way, I'm quitting my job next month to get married. I'm bringing my fiancé home to meet the family soon." I was shocked in so many ways, my voice came out weird. The sudden decision to quit her job was surprising enough, let alone her getting married. I know all about Emily's ex-boyfriends, and she's dated all kinds of guys. Lately, she's been saying over the phone that she's definitely going to marry rich, but honestly, I can't imagine who she'd end up marrying. "You're quitting your job? And getting married?" "Yeah, I mean, I work hard, but my boss nitpicks about tiny mistakes and formatting issues, I just can't deal with it anymore." "Wanna know about my fiancé? What's he like?" "You always said you wanted to marry a wealthy, handsome guy." "Actually, he's a banker in New York, 5 years older than me. He's in sales and really good at it, so he has to travel for work a lot." I was at a loss for words, stunned on the phone. "Oh, that's good for you. Talking to Dad and Mom about it is such a hassle, just pass the message for me. We'll set up a day to meet." Emily has always had this bad habit of dumping everything on me just because it's a hassle for her. I've given up on thinking she'll change at this age. I told my parents about Emily's message and that she wanted us to set a date to meet her fiancé. Looks like we can set it for Sunday afternoon in 2 weeks, around 3 p.m. Is that okay? Sunday's fine. I'll let him know. But on the promised Sunday, even when the afternoon rolled around, there was no sign of Emily and her fiancé. There was no reply to my messages, and I had no idea where they were or what they were doing. Wonder what's going on? They don't show up or call on such an important day. 2 hours of waiting and worrying if they'd gotten into an accident. The doorbell finally rang. Next to Emily was a tall man who introduced himself as Ryder Johnson. He had the refreshing smile of a salesman, a slender build, and smart movements. I found myself staring at him. He looked like someone straight out of a movie. Sorry for the delay. Got held up at a client meeting. Ryder's always busy with work, remember? Anyway, come in. Hannah, make some coffee and snacks for him. Actually, I just had coffee at the client's. I try to limit myself to 1 cup a day to avoid too much caffeine. Ryder looked around, sniffing disdainfully, making me feel a slight irritation towards him. Oh, really? Then I'll make decaf coffee. Were you the sister? I heard you work. I'm Hannah, Emily's sister. I work in an office at a local specialty food company. Oh, that place. Everyone knows too much caffeine affects your daily performance, right? But as the conversation went on, I started noticing something odd about this man. Everything he said seemed to irk me. He appeared self-absorbed, almost as if he was looking down on others. There was a disconcerting feeling while talking to him. And most importantly, I noticed right away that he lacked any words of gratitude or apology. Here's your coffee and snacks. This is decaf. Oh, right. Hey, isn't this cake from that department store's limited edition? The cream doesn't have much depth to it, kinda mediocre. Really? You think so too? Ryder, you have such a good taste. Well, I've been treated to a lot by clients, so I naturally pick up on these things. A cake deserves better cream, you know, something with more richness and depth. Emily and Ryder, with their fussy taste and know-it-all attitude, didn't even apologize for being late. They complained about the cake and coffee served. Frankly, I found Ryder's behavior quite rude. Even if he didn't like it, would anyone really complain so blatantly in front of others? But it was clear he was more impolite than I had imagined. This became evident when my parents met Ryder, who seemed to have just come from working in the field and had some dirt on his clothes. Thanks for coming all this way. I'm Emily's father. Oh, hi. Ryder glanced at my dad and immediately frowned. Sensing this, Emily started to scold my father. Wait, you're dressed like that for an engagement meeting? Well, I guess this is the best outfit your dad could manage. After all, we're in the countryside, not much variety in clothes. That's true. Not many places to shop around here, and sophisticated fashion is hard to come by. I was furious at their exchange. I wanted to retort immediately. But my parents, either oblivious to or ignoring Ryder and Emily's sarcasm, continued the conversation with smiles. So, Ryder, you're planning to marry Emily? Yes, I'd like to marry Emily. That's why I'm here. That's wonderful. Emily, you found such a fantastic man. Well, at my level, it's gotta be someone like Ryder to balance things out, you know? Emily replied, puffing up her nose. I had to bite my tongue at her words and continued listening as a member of the family. So, where will you two live after getting married? We're not sure yet. Ryder's so good at his job, he's always in demand at different branches. There's even talk of a promotion coming up. I'm being recognized for my performance in loan operations, even getting an award soon. I thought Emily could join the celebration as my wife. That's impressive. Quite the achiever, aren't you? My dad laughed heartily, drinking his tea, and my mom couldn't contain her excitement. Honestly, I didn't know what to do and just sipped my tea, which seemed tasteless, trying to process everything. As we talked, the topic shifted to their wedding plans. Are you two planning a wedding ceremony? Of course, we're planning to have it at a famous hotel in New York. I happen to know the manager of a hotel in New York, so we're thinking of getting him to arrange the wedding. Wow, that sounds exciting. I can't wait for the wedding. Emily and Ryder exchanged glances with sour expressions, as if they had just swallowed a bitter pill. Wait, you're coming to the wedding? A wedding is a place to express gratitude to those who have supported you and to declare your commitment to the future. Yet, I couldn't believe it when I heard that Emily didn't want our parents, her own family, to attend. Dad pretended not to hear and continued the conversation. In New York, huh? I've got farm work around that time. But maybe I can hire some help? Yeah, it's our busy season. We should arrange for help early. If we arrange for help now, we should be able to go. Haven't been to New York in decades. Maybe stay for a couple of nights? Mom and Dad were excitedly discussing it, but Emily cut them off. No, you don't have to come. Not come? Why? Well, Hannah told me Dad hurt his back doing farm work. Emily's gaze darted around nervously. Yeah, but it's a wedding, after all. Besides, Ryder's parents have already passed away due to illness and accidents, so it would really bother him. Mom covered her mouth in surprise, unable to hide her shock. I didn't know that. Sorry, Ryder. But we'd still like to see our daughter's big day. Emily jumped at the opportunity to speak up. How about live streaming the wedding? You can watch it in real time from home. I'd prefer to be there in person, but considering Ryder's feelings, watching from home would be okay, right, Dad? Yeah, I guess. Then Emily turned to me with a surprising request.
So, Hannah, I want you to set up the live stream. You've always been good with computers, you can handle it, right?
Me? Set up the live stream for your wedding? Think of it as helping your sister who's done so much for you. I wanted to question what exactly she had done for me, but I had a feeling refusing would lead to more trouble later. It wasn't impossible, so I reluctantly agreed. Okay, I'll take care of the live streaming. How many people are you expecting to watch?
About 500, I guess. Ryder has a lot of work contacts, and it's hard to narrow down. He's well respected. Not just my current colleagues, but people from all over want to see my wedding. We've already cut down the list.
I stood up, glancing at Emily and Ryder as they bragged. I'll talk to the venue and set things up. After that, Emily and I communicated more about the online wedding. With 500 guests, there was a lot to prepare, and it wasn't easy. I had to interact with Emily and Ryder during the preparations, but something kept bothering me. They seemed to mock me and our parents in their remarks. It felt like having a fishbone stuck in my throat, irritating and unsettling. I can't imagine spending my life just working on a farm. It's a job that doesn't require much thinking. Just physical labor. Working from dawn till dusk, covered in mud? That's pathetic. As the eldest daughter, I'd be troubled if they expected me to take over. And I definitely wouldn't want a family covered in mud. They spoke without any knowledge or respect for our parents. I knew from the meetings, but our parents had no idea Emily and Ryder thought this way. In fact, our parents always say how glad they are that Emily is marrying such a wonderful person, so they must truly believe it from the bottom of their hearts. I understood my parents' desire to see Emily's wedding. I once boldly asked Emily about letting our parents attend. Hey, about the wedding. What if we have relatives attend online, but just let Mom and Dad see it in person? They're really looking forward to seeing your big day. In person? At the wedding venue? Yeah. They always talk about your wedding at home. I know it's tough for Ryder, but can't we arrange just 2 seats for them? Then, Emily burst into laughter and said something unbelievable. No way. Ryder's parents and relatives are all coming, of course. What? But you said they were gone due to an accident or illness. Can't believe you fell for that. I had to say that because our parents were there. I couldn't believe my ears. Was Emily implying she didn't want our parents at the wedding? But it's a wedding, right? Isn't it a time to show gratitude to your parents? Having our plain, country-style parents at a fancy hotel would be so out of place. Besides, they'd be there as my parents. It would be embarrassing if people knew they were my family. So you were lying when you said Ryder's family wasn't around? Of course, it was a lie. Ryder's parents and relatives are all coming. I was shocked to hear Emily laughing on the other end of the phone. His parents and relatives, what do you mean?
Ryder's parents are company presidents, sophisticated and elegant. I can't have them in the same room as our parents. It's just not right.
So, you're intentionally not inviting our parents just for that reason?
Having a president's family and some farmers together would be ridiculous. Anyway, I told them Ryder's parents were gone, so let's just stick with that.
I ended the call with Emily, feeling angry and frustrated. Later, I continued to coordinate with Emily for the wedding. Then, one day, Emily and Ryder called me. Hey, what's up? I just wanted to tell you about the wedding. We've arranged seats for our parents, so please let them know.
Really? They'll be so happy. Did you arrange this?
Well, yes. After some consideration, we managed to make it possible for them to come. I was pleased to see Emily could be considerate when she wanted to.
Thank you. Emily, Ryder, you must have gone through a lot to arrange this. Mom and Dad will be thrilled. But, can we get everything ready in time?
Don't worry about that. We'll take care of the arrangements. Just tell them to come without bringing anything. I was surprised to see Emily being so well prepared. Emily always had this belief that others would sort things out for her. It was surprising to hear her say, just prepare yourself and come over, that's all you need to do.
Got it. I'll let Mom and Dad know.
You sure we don't need to bring anything? Well, I thought it would be too much to ask you to prepare everything at the last minute. Just come to the venue and you'll see. After hanging up, I immediately told my parents they could go to the wedding without worrying about preparations. They were overjoyed, almost jumping with happiness. Ryder must have a lot on his mind. We're grateful. It's nice to see Emily marrying into a family that understands people's feelings. It's common for parents attending weddings to rent their outfits and accessories. Knowing this, I wasn't surprised when Emily said to come empty-handed. I guess they'll wear rented tuxedos and formal dresses at the venue. I arrived at the venue early to set up for the live stream. While I was arranging the cameras and equipment, my parents arrived. I heard laughter when they appeared on the computer screen. Look at those country bumpkins from a poor farm showing up here. Wow, they really came with nothing. They don't belong in a place like this. How clueless can you get? In their dressing room, Emily and Ryder started mocking my parents too. Spreading their country stink all over this elegant place, aren't they ashamed? While my parents were getting ready, Emily and Ryder didn't stop their hurtful comments. It's unbelievable that they invited their parents to their wedding only to insult them for coming. I felt sorry for my parents, but I couldn't just celebrate Emily and Ryder's marriage without addressing this. I took the remote and pressed a button. Suddenly, their conversation in the dressing room was broadcasted through the loudspeakers throughout the venue. I also started the video on the computer. By pressing this button, the online wedding stream began. Emily and Ryder never expected it to be pressed before the actual ceremony. Their insults and cruel laughter echoed in the hall. The dressing room was soundproof, so they had no idea what was happening outside. Their offensive words continued to play for a while around the venue. Those who arrived early or were connected online for the ceremony must have been shocked. Hearing such harsh words from a bride in a beautiful white dress is unbearable. My parents finished their preparations quickly and were waiting near the venue, hearing every word. My usually quiet father stood up and said, "Let's go home." Okay. My mother agreed, and they left the venue expressionlessly. Following their lead, other guests began to leave too. My parents were seen talking with people who seemed to be Ryder's parents. Inside the waiting room, Emily and Ryder were clueless about the reactions of my parents and the guests, which was ironically funny. The wedding staff rushed to Emily and Ryder, but it was too late. The venue was almost empty, with many noticeable vacant seats.
What's going on here? Why is everyone gone? This is crazy, right?
The only crazy thing here is what you've done. They turned to me, startled. Did you do something weird? Emily muttered timidly, to which I responded firmly. Isn't it your own actions that caused this? Emily looked shocked. Do you realize how your parents felt about this day?
Are you saying this is my fault?
Emily glared at me angrily. Ryder, noticing the commotion, came running over. Can you believe almost everyone left? How could this happen? Ryder, you're supposed to be well respected, right? Is this the respect you've earned? Only a few people remained in the venue, looking uncomfortable and restless. Even the few people who remained at the wedding seemed uncomfortable, clearly restless from a distance. They looked like they didn't know what to do, which honestly made me feel a bit sorry for them, but it couldn't be helped. Oh, by the way, there's someone I wanted Ryder to meet. Would you mind? I said, calling over a woman. Who is this? You wouldn't know her, Emily. She's Ryder's girlfriend.
What? I didn't know about this. Why are you here?
Ryder appeared to be shaking and looked as if he didn't understand what was happening. Did you know Dad owns a small office building downtown? Well, sure, the one near the station, right? That's the one. He goes there sometimes to share the vegetables we grow on the farm. He got to talking with some of the workers there, and that's how he found out. Emily looked at me, her face saying she didn't understand what was going on. A woman Dad often chats with casually showed her phone once, and her lock screen had a man who looked just like Ryder, so Dad asked her about it.
What? A lock screen picture of Ryder, what does that mean?
When Dad asked, she said the man in the picture with her was her boyfriend.
That's ridiculous, believing in such a soap opera story. How gullible can you get?
I sighed. Dad didn't think it was actually Ryder either. But when he told the woman about Emily and Ryder's wedding plans, she said I thought so. That's when he decided to check it out himself. The woman, claimed to be Ryder's girlfriend, seemed lost for words and left the venue in tears.
What do you mean? Were you seeing someone else too? I thought you only loved me. No, it's not like that. She was just a fling, you are the real deal, right? That's not the point. Stop joking around.
Then, I decided to reveal the biggest twist. You guys seem to be fighting right after getting married, but remember, the camera is still rolling.
What do you mean?
Well, you know what Ryder said. He has many acquaintances and wanted many people to watch the wedding online. You can't just stop the online camera midway. Ryder's face turned pale as he realized what I meant.
Does this mean this whole conversation has been broadcasted?
Looks like it. Normally, no one expects a wedding to turn into such an embarrassing spectacle. Ryder's expression stiffened and he grew increasingly pale.
What do we do? This is bad.
What's so bad about it? Emily asked, not understanding the severity of the situation. I decided to explain it to her. This online wedding, people from Ryder's work are watching, right? Including people from his next transfer location?
No way.
Yes, exactly. He was looking forward to showing off to his colleagues and getting a promotion at his new position. Nobody expected someone up for a promotion to cause such a scandal. Ryder turned pale and finally collapsed to his knees. After that, things went downhill for Emily and Ryder. Emily, who had thought she was marrying an elite banker and the son of a major company's CEO, was devastated when the truth unfolded. Emily was deeply shaken because she had firmly believed that Ryder was an elite banker and his family owned a prestigious corporation. However, it turned out that Ryder's father was just the owner of a small company located in one of the office buildings my father owns in the city. This revelation came to light when they attended the wedding, saw the seating chart, and recognized his father's face. In the venue, while my parents were about to leave, the man desperately apologizing was actually Ryder's father. Despite having already submitted their marriage certificate, Emily and Ryder couldn't call off the marriage and had to continue their married life, albeit reluctantly. Ryder's promotion at his new job was also jeopardized, becoming the guy who embarrassed himself at his wedding. Having their private insults and Ryder's affair exposed at the wedding was undoubtedly humiliating. Nevertheless, Ryder had no choice but to stick with his current job at the bank, now being treated like an outcast. His sales performance plummeted, and the wedding fiasco became a widely known tale. Moreover, someone recorded the guests leaving the wedding one by one, and this footage became a famous wedding mishap video online. Emily and Ryder, who never expected to become infamous in such a way, are now living covertly, wearing off-season masks and sunglasses when walking through the streets. As for me, I continue to live my days in my hometown. There's no glitz or glamour, but I still get my work done and enjoy shopping and reading on weekends. There are joys in a lifestyle that fits me well, and I feel that this is not so bad. I've also experienced a fresh start in my life. I've been getting along well with a salesperson who joined our company mid-year.
He may not have outstanding academic achievements or career milestones, but his constant thoughtfulness for me is evident. Meeting a man with kindness like sunshine, I am now savoring my own happiness.